Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to this session of Self-Improvement to the Quran series. The passage that we are going to study today is from Surah Al-Shura, which is the 42nd surah of the Quran, and the verses that will be under discussion are verses 37 and 38 of this surah. So I'm just going to read out the text and translation of these verses. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشَ وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And those who abstain from major sins and open vulgarities, and when they are overcome by anger, such are these people that they forgive. So the qualities of believers which are mentioned in the Quran in various passages, of course, they all depict some quality or the other. At times you'll find a similar quality being depicted in different passages, but the stress and the nuance would change. And here you can see that another aspect of the traits that a believer should have is discussed. And that aspect is that as these believers are concerned, they abstain from major sins and open vulgarities. This is something which is of utmost importance to understand, that major sins, of course, we know from the Quran that three major sins which are mentioned in Surah Furqan. The first of them is polytheism, is to associate partners with God. The second is to kill someone without justification. And of course, when we say without justification, it means that the other person is not guilty of killing someone or not guilty of spreading disorder in the land. And also, this killing has to be retaliated, not by the person or the heirs of the victims, but of course by the state itself. And the third offense which is mentioned as a major sin is adultery. So murder, adultery, and polytheism. These are three major sins, and Quran says that as far as these sins are concerned, if people abstain from them, and not only that, they also abstain from open vulgarities. They do not do things which are vulgar in any way. I mean, this of course starts from indecent dressing, and then it goes on to of course, a thing as heinous as adultery itself. So this has been mentioned separately, and at times the Quran does this, that whilst grouping something together, it sometimes takes out one thing from that group in order to stress it. So open vulgarities, specifically adultery, was already mentioned earlier on in the major sins, but in order to stress it, it was also mentioned after. And therefore we are told that as far as these major sins are concerned, all believers, all true believers, they truly abstain from such things, because these are the things which lead a person to hellfire. These are the persons which stir the wrath of the Almighty. And there is no forgiveness if a person who has done these and he has not been acquitted or forgiven. So we have to be extremely careful in this regard. And today in this world where vulgarity has become something which a person does not even feel whether we are doing something vulgar or not, or in other words, the line between vulgar things and non-vulgar things has become so thin that without realizing we step into vulgarities, we step into extreme form of vulgarities, and at times we don't realize, because the age that we are living in is the age in which things have become blurry in many aspects, especially in aspects related to gender and sexual issues. So one of the traits that is mentioned of these believers is that they abstain from these open vulgarities and they abstain from major sins. And of course, this is something which needs the special help of God. We know that sexual vulgarities are always those which have a great attraction. And it is only when you have a strong God connection that when something comes your way, you are able to ward it off. So look at what happened to Prophet Joseph. And in his own times, when he was tempted and lured by a woman, and the Quran says that لَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّا بِهَا لَوْلَا رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّي. And she had tried to lure him, and Yusuf would have fallen to that. Joseph would have fallen to that had he not seen God's burhan, which means that God helped him right at that time. And because he remained a very pure individual in most part of his life, or all part of his life, at this very critical and precarious juncture, the Almighty helped him and he got this courage to ward off the temptations of that woman. So this is something we have to understand, that even prophets of God, they are not secure from it. These things, these leanings are there, and it is our own effort and our strength that we have to control ourselves. And the stronger our connection with God, the stronger our control would be. So we have to understand that as far as vulgarities are concerned, open indecencies are concerned, lewdness is concerned, the antidote to this is to have refuge in God, to take refuge in God, in God's mercy, in God's protection, in connecting to Him through the Quran, in connecting through Him through charitable acts, in connecting through Him through a very deep sense of connection, in a way that we think that we are in His refuge and in His shelter. The next thing which is mentioned here is وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And those who have responded to the invitation of their Lord, istajabu li rabbihim, and are diligent in the prayer, and their system is based on their mutual consultation, and spend for our cause from the sustenance we have blessed them with. So again, you see some of the traits which are mentioned sequentially, one after the other. The first thing that is mentioned is وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ, that they say yes, they respond in a positive way to the call of their Lord, which of course means when they are called towards their Lord, they run towards it, they leap towards it, and there's no reluctance or hesitancy on their part. And especially for people in the times of the revelation of the Quran, we know that it was not an easy affair to immediately respond to the calls of the Prophet, because one knew that responding positively to the calls of a prophet would mean severe forms of persecution, severe forms of oppression in which people were to which people were subjected. So we do have how Bilal radhiyallahu anhu was severely tortured. We know what happened to Ammar bin Yasir and a host of other people. So we must understand that as far as responding to the call of God is concerned, it is different in different times, but in the time of the revelation of the Quran, it was one of the most, it was something which actually meant that you might have to sacrifice your life if you respond positively to the message of God. But of course, today things are totally different. But still, the Quran is calling us out, and it is like someone who has these glad tidings, giving us these glad tidings that as we follow the invitation of our Lord, if we follow the way of the Prophet, we will end up in paradise. So the other trait which is mentioned is istajabu li rabbihim. They positively respond to the call of their Lord, and aqamus salah. They are ones who adhere diligently to the prayer. They are ones who are extremely steadfast in the prayer. And as you might have seen in the last so many sessions, almost in every session or every second session, we find the prayer being mentioned continuously. And this actually shows how important the prayer is in our religion, because it is the foremost connection that we have with the Almighty. And the biggest thing here, dear viewers, is that if we start enjoying the prayer, if we start connecting to the Almighty in a way that we feel as if we are being looked after, as if we are being drenched by His mercy, there is no better a connection with the Almighty than through the prayer. So the trait which is mentioned here is that they are diligent in the prayer. They are absolutely punctual. It's not that prayer is something which comes and goes to them. It's like a permanent habit that they have. It is something which is part and parcel of their lives. When they plan their day, they know which prayer will come at what time and at which place, and they are especially observant of this fact that the prayer should come at a time when a person is in a situation that he or she can offer it in a very calm way and in a way that he or she is fully focused towards his Lord. So such is the importance of the prayer. In fact, the importance which Tawheed or monotheism has in beliefs is the same as the prayer has in deeds. So these two things go side by side. And then it is mentioned, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ, that their system is based on consultation, which means that the system, the collective system, is something which is not autocratic. It is not monarchic in any way. It is not at all something which is theocratic. It is based on consultation, which means rulers will be elected on the basis of the will of the people. And this obviously means that if there is a difference of opinion, that the opinion of the majority will always prevail. And the Quran, the Quranic system, although the Quran is not given it a name, but to us this is what Shura means, that the will of the majority would be implemented. And as such, we can see that the Quran itself is something which in this respect is absolutely at par with democratic norms that we cherish, although we are still far off from implementing those democratic norms in many countries, in spite of claiming to be those who do follow democracy. But the Quran 14 centuries ago advocated a system in which instead of any autocracy, instead of any aristocracy or any form of monarchy or theocracy, it said that it's the will of the people who should prevail, because it's the lot of people that we have that has to be governed, and it's no better a governance by what people themselves would like to be governed by whom. So the person who's going to govern them should come from them. And this is what the Quran told us centuries ago. So another thing which has to be made clear is that we have to be democratic in our society, which of course also reflects on other systems that we make. Thus, for example, the various organizations that we make, which are based on a board of governors maybe, or a syndicate, all of them should have this democratic spirit in them, that the will of the majority should prevail. And finally, it is said, وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, and they spend from the sustenance we have blessed them with. So these believers, they are not stingy. They are not frugal in this regard. They spend generously for the cause of God. And we have to remember that as far as resources are concerned, as far as the wealth that God has blessed people is concerned, this is something which is God himself entrusting people with things. And the best way to thank God in this regard is to share the blessings that he has given us. And this sharing of blessings, as the Quran says, must follow certain norms as well. Thus, for example, showing off this spending is something which goes totally against the spirit, and the Quran has really proscribed it. Similarly, it has also said that reminding people of one's generosity, people on whom you had spent, and then you keep reminding them that, look what I did for you. The Quran says that this is not good at all, and it says, "La tubtilu sadaqatikum bil manni wal aza," that don't waste. Don't let your charity go waste by reminding people of your generosity on them, and thereby causing harassment to them. And of course, this is something that we have to always understand, that people who live in a society, people who are underprivileged, the state has the responsibility to cover for their expenses, but it's not always possible for the state to do so. So whatever we can do for our brethren is something that we should always be on the lookout. And especially, dear viewers, people who have this self-esteem that they would not beg or come before you, they are the ones that we should go after, and especially find in our society that they have that self-esteem in them, that they would not take the initiative in asking for any resources, unlike many others. But of course, there is a sizable amount of people present in our society who would rather sleep empty stomach than to go and ask for food from someone. So it is these white collar people, it is these people who have this self-esteem that we need to always be on the lookout. And there are plenty in our society. As far as we can see, it's just a question of opening our eyes. It's just a question of being sensitive to their needs. And it's just a question of realizing that our brothers and sisters who are in a spot of bother, they are I mean, they have a right on us, and we have an obligation that we owe to them, and this obligation can only be fulfilled if we open our eyes and ears to their needs. So this brings us to an end to the discussion that we have just done on this passage, and now we can open our question answer session.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for this very valuable talk today. The first question that we have is of the Hassan Sharik. Please go ahead.
Does this question answer session have to be related to this session, or could it be any question?
No, it could be a general question for your guidance.
Okay, thank you. My question is regarding when Quran mentions the names of our prophets in a different way. For example, Jesus is translated as Isa, and so on. There are many. All prophets have different. So my question here is, how did this change happen? Why couldn't in Arabic we could have said Jesus as well and Maryam as Mary? I mean, it could be the same. And secondly, my question is, now since we know that the name of Isa alayhi salam was indeed Jesus, so is it not better for us to just say Jesus alayhi salam instead of Isa alayhi salam, because that's how he was known?
Well, you see, the names of the prophets, they have gone through various changes because, I mean, the original language in which we know that the Bible was revealed was Syriac, and Syriac is something which is no longer, I mean, it was no longer spoken or written when the first gospel was actually written. So the Quran has used the Arabic words for the names of all those prophets. And so, I mean, I don't find any problem that we can use both names. We can use biblical names, we can use the Quranic names. You see, the word John could not have been adopted by the Quran, not because it has something against the word, but because it couldn't have been anglicized the way we think. So, you see, the Quran has adopted those spellings, or those, I would say, that pronunciation of the word which is in line with its own a system of rhyme and its own semantics, I would say. So there's absolutely no problem if we continue to call David as Dawood or Dawood as David, and interchangeably. That is what the teaching for us is concerned. But as far as why the Quran did not use it is concerned, as I said, it had to convert those names into its own Arabic. It had to Arabicize them, so to speak.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, you can have your question now.
Sir, मेरा calculation ज़कात calculation के बारे में सवाल है. Suppose I got, say, for example, $100,000 loan from the government, and I loan it to my brother, and now he has returned, say, 30% of it, and 70% still out. So, would I count that money that's sitting, that $30,000 also sitting with me? I have not returned it yet. So that would I count that money also zakatable, or?
You will count the money that you have. I mean, if he has just returned $30,000 to you, so if your zakat date has arrived and that wealth or that amount is in your account, you'll give zakat on that. So something which you don't have is not zakatable. I mean, if he has not returned the loan, he's liable to pay for that. As far as you're concerned, you're just going to pay for what you have.
And but the interest or the insurance I have paid on that loan, that's not deductible, is it?
I mean, you see, well, if you have lent something and that lending is, I mean, have you Islamically lended something, or is it to the bank that you have lent something?
Actually, I got loan from the government, and government deferred the loan for a couple of years, so we didn't have to make payment for a couple of years because of the pandemic. And I actually didn't need the loan. I loaned that to my brother. And
okay, you lent that amount to your brother.
Yeah, but you have to have insurance on the loan. So I've been paying insurance for the loan. I've been paying the interest for the loan. He just returned me back $30,000.
I mean, they are expenses that you are giving. I mean, that they have to be counted separately. As far as the loan itself is concerned, if you don't have it in your pocket, I mean, if your brother has it, let's say you said that $70,000 are still with him, so I mean, he's liable for that loan. But the amount that he's returned to you is like $30,000. So if your zakat date has arrived and you have that amount with you, then of course you'll be liable for that. But remember, you're also going to return it to the government. So this is basically an amount that you, as long as you have it and you are able to use it, you'll give a zakat on it. But if you have returned it already to the government, then of course you don't have to pay anything.
And no, the question, the bigger question is that the interest and the insurance I've been paying for like 2-3 years from the government, that's coming up to be like 7,000.
So that's a separate thing. I mean, the interest and the insurance that you are paying is an expense.
Is it
It's an
deductible?
expense. So is not deductible.
Not deductible. As
See,
expense,
that's an
not
expense that
deductible.
you're paying. Expense is not deductible. I mean, that is a separate thing that you have to do in order to acquire that loan. You cannot get the loan unless you pay back on interest and unless you insure that amount. So that has to be treated separately.
So that's question was that you have to deduct that from, so that's not deductible.
That's not deductible.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Shehzad, I have a written question that requests your knowledge about the ruling in Islamic code of law. If the mother has the custody of the daughter after divorce and the father pays maintenance through court every month and the mother remarries, could the father claim for child custody since the stepfather will be a na-mahram? Would Islam
As I
guide
said, this is, I mean, on the basis of the stepfather being na-mahram is not enough basis for the father to claim custody, because I mean, it's not that you cannot live in the house of a non-mahram if whatever the norms are, they are adhered to. If they live in a way that these norms of gender interaction they are adhered to, that is something which we always do. I mean, cousins live with each other in spite of the fact that they are non-mahram, but they live with a certain amount of distance and a certain amount of, as I said, etiquette that they need to follow. So if that etiquette is followed, this is not reason enough for the husband to claim the custody of their child. And also, when such matters are sub judice, it's the court which has to decide. And in this regard, we have to understand that Islam has not given any set rule regarding the custody of children. What it has given us in this regard is that a court of law should decide in keeping in view the welfare of the children. So, in different circumstances, this welfare could be different for different families. But if you ask for this specific question, then if I would be sitting in the place of that judge, unless I have more data and unless I have a lot of other things on which I can give a ruling, this is not reason enough to claim the custody, I would say.
All right, thank you. It's a very good point that in joint family setups, a lot of people live in the non-mahram setting. Thank you. Fabia Niazi, you may have your question now.
Ustaz, a woman asked me about itikaf at home. What argument should I present before her? I didn't know that, so I thought I should ask you about it.
I mean, if someone asks you regarding itikaf, it's simple that itikaf is something that can be done. The Quran has, referred to it. It's a pre-existing sunnah of the prophets of God. It has to be done in a mosque. And there has to be some reason that if the mosque is not available, then women have been allowed to, or it's like a second option for them to do itikaf at their own homes. But primarily, itikaf is something which is associated with the fast and with the mosque. So two things that you have to do it in the month of Ramadan, and secondly, it has to be in the mosque. And it's the pinnacle, I would say, of fasting that you choose about, like let's say last 10 days, or it would be less than those 10 days, and you sit in isolation and you just devote yourselves entirely to the Almighty. You read the Quran during your itikaf, you connect with Him through various other ways, and I would say this is the ultimate thing that one can do. It's not an easy worship ritual at all, and therefore it's not compulsory as well. It's an optional act of worship, but it carries significant reward. In fact, a lot of reward. So if she's asking you, it's something that you can always recommend to her. And if there is a nearby mosque in which she can sit in itikaf, then there's nothing like it.
Hassan Sharik, you may ask your question now.
Thank you again. Dr. Shehzad, racism has been addressed in Islam very nicely, as we see the last sermon of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But I was reading through Quran and I found something that I just can't make sense of. So in the Quran, in Surah Al Imran, in verses 106 and 107, is talking about the day of judgment where the faces will turn white and some faces will turn black. And as for those who are faces that turn black, they are basically those of the disbeliever, and they'll be said that case the punishment, and the faces
Right.
that will turn white. So the question here, Allah Ta'ala mentions faces as white and black, and this is very similar to saying that white has some, benefit or privileges or good things about white faces. Black faces are. So, can you please explain what's going on here?
Well, actually, the Quran, if you look at the verse, it says "Yawma tabyaddu wujuhun wa taswaddu wujuh." These are the Arabic words, which mean that some faces will shine on that day. They'll be radiant on that day. So the word ibyadda, which means to turn white, I mean, it's not the color that is being talked about. It's that the brightness on the faces which is being talked about. And the taswaddu, the dark side, is actually opposite of radiance. So it's like I mean, you are devoid of any radiance, and you are in a sort of totally dejected and totally disappointed. So your face, when there's your facial expression, when it lights up, it gives you that bright feeling. So that is what is meant for the whitening of faces for the believers. And when you become despondent and dejected, and you just become disgruntled at the result, the lack of radiance and vibrancy that is found on your faces is depicted as that it has turned black. So it's not any racist comment made by the Quran, but it's the fact that when you say you brighten up, I mean, to be bright is not to say that someone is racist. It's to say that this is something which is like a reward to that person.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, you may ask your question now.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, मेरा दूसरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि एक लेडी अगर if she has not been fasting because she's on heavy medication, is diabetic and all that, so can she sit for itikaf?
She is not fasting.
She's not fasting because of the.
No, she cannot. You see, itikaf, I mean, for itikaf, fasting is a prerequisite. You cannot do itikaf without fasting. And if she wants to do something, there is something which people who don't fast, and they would still want to have part of that, I mean, some part of that reward, then the technical term for this is rabat. Rabat means that you spend some time in the mosque, and it's not like an itikaf. It's like just attaching yourself to the mosque. You just go and sit there for as long as you like. But technically, this is not called itikaf. This is, as I said, it's called rabat, which means that you stay stationed in that mosque maybe for a couple of hours or even a small period of time. So that again is something which is worthy of, I mean, of reward, but it's not called itikaf.
Rabat cannot be done at home then.
I mean, this is the third. I mean, if it is rabat itself is something that has to be done in the mosque. I mean, rabat relates to the mosque. But if that is also not possible, it's like a person is so sick and he has the or she has the intention that had she had the health to do so, she would have done so. I guess she would get the reward if she does so in her own home as well.
Thank you. Fabia Niazi, you may go now.
A question has come before me regarding sources of religion. We know that Ustaz has presented Quran and Sunnah as the sources of religion, but a person asked me, a person standing in this age can see lots of practices in the name of Sunnah, but though a few of them are bidas. So how he or she is going to get come to know about the exact sunnahs and differentiate between bidah and sunnah? The only way is to look into the hadith collection. So we should regard hadith as the source of religion. I had no answer to this, so I thought to ask this.
Yes, you see, Sunnah itself is not dependent on Hadith at all. Sunnah is something which is transmitted through the practical adherence of the Ummah to it. So, thus, like the 5 prayers or the fast itself, you'll not find any of them in the Quran. So, these are established practices which are found all around you. I mean, Hadith just has a record. I mean, just to give you an example. when I consult a dictionary is going to give me the record of a word and the meaning of a word, which itself is proven through generations. I mean, so if I know certain words and I just consult one dictionary and then come up with this audacious claim that, well, look, this is just one dictionary telling me that the word means such and such. So I would be wrong in that, because you see what dictionary is doing is it's only giving an entry of a word which is otherwise transmitted through consensus or perpetual practice of people who are speaking that language. So in a very similar way, hadith might contain the record of the sunnah, but it's not the source of the sunnah. Just as the dictionary is not the source of the word, the source is that the person who has collected that dictionary or who has authored that dictionary, he has actually found that this is the meaning of the word as people are speaking it in the society. So he has collected the data from the society and he has just entered it into his dictionary. In a very similar way, people who had collected hadith, at times they saw that people were practicing, they were praying 5 times a day, or they were fasting. So like Imam Bukhari or some of the other scholars of hadith, what they did was something which was already unanimously being followed in the society, they just picked that up and just entered in their book. So what you need to tell your friend is that in this regard, dictionaries or books of hadith, they at times, and not always, they at times contain a record of the sunnah, but the sunnah itself is something which is found to be observed in the society. It is unanimously accepted as a practice of the Prophet, and a very, very vast majority of people, they transmit it. And as far as bid'ah or innovation is concerned, you always get to know about it, because the history of the bid'ah is something that is always traceable. You'll always get to know that, well, this is the time when it was introduced. So the sunnah does not have a history. It will go straight back to the Prophet. But in the case of a bid'ah, whenever it was introduced, you will have a definite timeline for that, and you can easily say that, look here, this is how people started to deviate, and then instead of following the sunnah, they adopted this bid'ah.
Shehzad, there is a written question about some Islamic-based ruling on this belief that whatever a husband earns is due to his wife's destiny. So they wanted to ask, they have been told that Allah gives a man whatever resources are actually conjoined with the wife's naseeb, as they write it. So they need your guidance.
There's nothing authentically reported in this regard. It's just like something has become famous. It's not that any risk or sustenance is specially awarded to a husband just because the wife is fortunate enough. It's just a matter of fact saying that has become popular. It's one of those cliches that has become so popular. Otherwise, I don't find any thing said in the Quran or in the Hadith to this effect.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for today's session.